first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you. It's an honor to support the work that you do. It's such an important thing right now with the world in motion. So I myself am living in the United States, but I'm the daughter of migrants from China. In the 1880s, anti-Chinese organizing led to the Exclusion Acts. It banned all Chinese workers. Because my grandfather was a merchant, my father was able to come as a boy, but women were completely banned. So he left his mother and sister behind and didn't see his mother ever again and didn't see his sister for 50 years. The Chinese Exclusion Acts were finally repealed in 1943 because US and China were allies in World War II. But also during World War II, very shamefully, the United States refused to accept a shipload of Jewish refugees from Germany. Um, and now today, the US and Israel are best friends, while Israel is itself committing genocide against the Palestinians. So the situation of people, I think we all know from our own experiences, changes depending on the global politics of the day. Today, the world is in greater chaos, it feels like, than ever before. The globe is spinning faster and faster, and it's going to spin some of us right off the planet. And these changes don't just affect people. We have animal refugees too. Like I used to live in urban Boston, and suddenly deer were eating the flowers in our garden, and coyotes were eating our pets, our dogs and cats. Not the fault of those animals because people had moved into their habitats. And it's the same with human refugees. It's not their fault that they move because they have been forced out of their habitats as well. The global economic system of neoliberalism since the 1980s has been increasing integration of the economies around the world. Neoliberal free trade agreements have given companies the right to put their factories anywhere they want, to exploit the natural and the human resources wherever they go. And all of this has given rise to a new transnational capitalist class who are loyal not so much to a nation, but to their moneyed friends. But while capital and corporations can travel and settle freely across the world, people cannot. They cannot follow the jobs. They cannot move to seek better wages and working conditions. They're confined to national cages, and they're fed minimal amounts of food and water. If they are lucky enough to escape, it's harder and harder to find a new home. So the turmoil in countries that lead to people leaving home, you know better than I do. I won't talk about that much. There's climate change, which have led to devastating fires and floods, and more people are climate refugees, as you know, but they're not given refugee status. There's the placing of sanctions on the U.S. by countries they don't like, and it's terrible that the pain of the people is used as a weapon. The strategy is that they will suffer so much that they will rise up and throw out the leftist leaders that the US does not like. There's military pressure, like the war on drugs in Mexico, which led not so much to an end to drug trafficking, but simply to more guns in Mexico and more deaths in both countries. And now we're seeing the extrajudicial killing of people on boats in the Caribbean, which will only create even more refugees. About the Trump government then and our situation today? Because all of those other things are things that have gone on by the United States for many years throughout all kinds of administrations. But the Trump government has increased the pressure. So, for example, he has used the classic method of blaming the victims and saying that the migrants, especially from Mexico, are criminals and rapists, and that has led to ICE, the immigration patrol, invading U.S. cities and grabbing people off the streets and deporting them without often enough investigation to find out if they are truly illegal. Um, he is ending refugee resettlement. He has recently said that you may see that he will only take in 7,500 refugees in the coming year. And most of those slots are reserved for white people from South Africa who are not in any danger in South Africa and are not fleeing their country. So those he's giving a right to resettle are not even refugees, but they're coming under the refugee status. The racism of this administration is just so blatant and open. He's saying the quiet part out loud. His concept of the US is a white nation, and he considers those who are black, brown, or yellow as stains on the white fabric of the nation that he is determined to clean off. And I think, unfortunately, Latin America is more and more on his mind. He is doing a pivot toward Latin America, which means that he's doubling down on the Monroe Doctrine, which proclaimed, for the last couple hundred years, that Latin America was the US's backyard and that the US had the right to intervene in American affairs in its own interest. So, what can we do under this situation? Clearly, more than ever, we need international solidarity. The billionaire class, the transnational capitalists are global, and we must be too. So, I will talk a little bit about what we in the US must do, and to tell you a little bit about the Mexico Solidarity Project. I'm the co-founder of that organization, which formed in 2019. By the way, it's not an NGO. It's not an official non-governmental organization. Why? That NGO status was invented in the 1950s at the height of the Red Scare. And, socialists were organizing in communities and in workplaces. And the US government did not want that to happen. And so the NGOs really are a container for organizing, and you have to register with the government. They know what you're doing, they know what money you have. You have to have a certain structure. So it actually puts more restraints on you than you probably want to have. So one thing is that I think NGOs need to build sister organizations that are not regulated by the state. We need more voluntary organizations, and that's what the Mexico Solidarity Project is. So when we formed in 2019, we realized that with the election of Andrés Manuel López Obrador, that we had a new opportunity to connect to the people of Mexico. And as 6 years have passed, we've seen that Mexico and the United States are going in opposite directions. Mexico has moved to the left, and the US has moved to the right. And as that is true, it's more important than ever that we protect Mexico's sovereignty and their right to pursue the fourth transformation. So how do we do that in the Mexico Solidarity Project? The first thing is that, as you know, the corporate media in the United States is very both pro-corporate and very nationalistic, so that the news people get about Mexico is often either false or misleading. So we need to counter that with real information, facts. So we have a bulletin where we interview people every week, and it's in both Spanish and English, where people can hear from the people themselves who are activists, from people like El Fisgón, who is the head of political formation in Mexico, to people on the street, like some miners who were dislocated and are now having to sell small items on the street instead of having a good paying job. So all of those voices are ones that we convey to the US progressive population. Secondly, we need to connect people to people. And we have a labor committee where we're trying to support the independent labor organizing going on in Mexico. But with everything we do, we need to do it with humility. We can't act like imperialists ourselves. So we have to take direction from the people of Mexico. So every action that we take is planned in conjunction with Mexicans. One example is that we were supporting workers at the VU manufacturing plant. It's an auto upholstery plant. And it turned out that the company was trying to close down rather than to accept a new union formation. Well, VU It is a company that belongs to a parent company that is headquartered in Detroit, Michigan. And so we organized a rally in Detroit to support those VU workers. So these are just examples of how we can work across borders to support each other. We also are involved in policy action. So as you know, the TMEC, the USMCA, is going to be renegotiated starting in 2026. And we need to work together with Mexico and Canada, especially with Mexico, to figure out how we might possibly transform that agreement to benefit not corporations or not just corporations, but also to benefit the people themselves. And then just alone within the United States, we need to work on immigration reform. It's clearly a broken system. And so the thing right now is that it might be possible if we work hard, because it's been clear because of Trump's deportations that these workers from other countries are needed. The agricultural sector and the service sector, hotels and restaurants, have been hit hard. And even the big agribusiness and corporations are admitting that they need these workers. They're admitting that they've used undocumented people for many, many years. And maybe this is a time when they'll be open to reform that gives migrants a pathway either to decent temporary work, not work that ties them to a single corporation with no rights, but also perhaps a right to a path to citizenship. I won't talk about what Mexico's task is because I'm not Mexican, and I'll leave that to you, Aret. I see you there. But just to say that it's pretty clear that Mexico needs to defend Claudia and the 4T, which they are doing. And they are also advocating within Mexico not only to help to repatriate Mexicans who have been deported from the US, but also to help migrants from other countries that are coming to Mexico. And then the task for all of Latin America is to push for unity. I think we had a moment of hope when AMLO was the president of CELAC to form a different bloc to counter US economic domination. Unfortunately, contradictions among Latin American countries have led to the weakening of CELAC. But I think it's important for all of us to push for more unity, because it's pretty clear that the US is the main enemy of all these countries, including its own people within the US. It's our enemy as well. So it's in the interest of all of us to end US imperialism, and that seems like a huge task. But right now, Trump's overreach may have a silver lining. Today, it's obvious to all to see that the US is no longer a great power, or not that it has ever been great in terms of its relationship to people, but today it is an empire in decline. So I think we all have hope. If we can mobilize ourselves and our resources, we can win. Thank you.